Guys, so you've seen who the panel is. I'll repeat again. Eoin Catháin, the director of the Irish Whisky Association. June O'Connell, who's the founder and director of Skellig 618 Distillery and Visitor Centre. John O'Connell, director and founder of West Cork Distilleries. That was John. Then we have Catherine O'Grady Powers and Conor Hyde, the owner of Hyde Irish Whisky. Okay. Now, I suppose really, in preparing for this session, and to be honest, there are others who know a lot more than I do about whiskey, but I was looking at before you set the scene really, Eoin, I was looking at the history of it, and it's quite interesting to me. I'd come across this before. It was actually produced by Irish Distillers years back, a little booklet which I kept showing, that the origin of the word whiskey comes from Ishka. And I was talking to a historian friend of mine. He said, apparently when we were colonized by the English couldn't pronounce the word Ishka. So they called it Whishka. And that then became part of the English language. And of course, it comes from Ishka Baha, meaning water of life. What was also fascinating for me was the history that at the end of the 19th century, Irish whiskey was the largest selling liquor around the world. Is that true?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so Ireland was the world's biggest producer of Irish whiskey, but then a few, events happened at the start of the 20th century.
Including two wars,
yeah? Two wars arising. We left the British Empire, so we lost access to that stream of commerce. Prohibition in the US, a number of things, I suppose, they flowed together and they worked to the detriment of Irish whiskey. So then we went into a period of massive decline, which has obviously now very thankfully been reversed in the past I would say really 30 years, but 2010 is when we mention is the date that we mention most often, where there were 4 working distilleries on the island of Ireland, and now there are over 50. So there's been, since I suppose, the geographical indication, the GI status, which we received in 1989, removal of tariffs. I'm sure we can talk about that as well in 1997, and then I suppose the real pride that Irish whiskey producers, who always had it, I suppose it was latent there, but have really started to take in the product, and that came far more to the fore. And then we have this great diversity of distilleries, which we see not only on the stage, but also in the membership of the Irish Whisky Association, and indeed in the exporters that go all over the world. And
is it true that in the last decade that the amount of operational distilleries in Ireland have increased tenfold?
Yeah, pretty much. It was mentioned actually in the discussion just there. There's pretty much every county now has a distillery or has a visitor centre, which tells the unique story of the Irish whiskey that's produced there, and that's one of the best USPs that we have, is that every company, every Irish whiskey producer has their own story, and that works very, very well when they export. And 95% of the Irish whiskey produced on this island is exported, which shows the openness and the international element of our sector.
And when you're looking at this, and we'll move around the panel then, when you're looking at this, I mean, clearly now there's, the traditional markets, the US is obviously in a very difficult situation with the tariff turmoil, maybe some flatlining, as June informed me, in Germany and places like this. So Asia is a good news story, because the industry is only beginning there, but the growth journey in Asia is really impressive. Could you? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I'm just back from Japan. I was there last week with the European Commission on a trade mission. I participated in a trade mission to China last year, 2 very interesting markets for Irish whiskey. As you say, the potential for growth, I think, is huge there. If you look at the top markets for Irish whiskey, you have India, which is one of, I think, maybe 4th or 5th. 700,000 plus cases of Irish whiskey sold every year. Japan then, about 200,000 cases. You're going down the list, you're looking at places like Indonesia, China, Thailand, South Korea. All very, there's some very strong numbers there. There's double-digit growth year on year. So that is a great opportunity, and I'm sure that the other panelists will be able to discuss that in more detail. But we do also need to keep in mind that the US is 5.4 million cases every year. So, and you are correct that there are a number of complications, I suppose, in the US market at the moment, which is causing Irish whiskey producers perhaps to look to the east, but there's a lot of ground to make up there. And even if we continue to grow at 100% growth in each one of these markets, it'll take a number of years for us to eclipse the US. So that's why I suppose we need to, market diversification is definitely the name of the game at the moment. It is a very positive news story, I absolutely agree. But there are some challenges as well as there are opportunities with every market. But if we're clear-eyed in the face of those, I think we can make a really good stab at it. And then continue perhaps not to rely so much on the US. Because I think even if there's a resolution, as the Minister Grealish mentioned, that we have to get something done by the 6th, 7th or the 9th of July, that could be temporary. I think for the next
could change by the day.
Exactly, it changes like the wind. So, look, there's great potential there, but there are some challenges that need to be overcome as well. But I think this is a great forum for us to discuss it.
Well, thank you very much. And yes, then, Tagas, with the dairy industry, which is what you say, relationships take time, and some people here have spent a lot of time developing the businesses. But there was one comment that struck me as quite direct. It was a good conversation. I won't name the source, but someone said, look, this summer, if the worst came to the worst, we've got $1 billion in dairy exports to the US that literally within a few months have to be relocated somewhere else. So the harsh reality is, where do we relocate them and how quickly can we do it? And that's the kind of sentiment that is being discussed. Okay, let's start. June, let's start with you. Could you tell us basically what's your origin story? How did you get into the Irish whiskey business? And what's your USP and kind of brand differentiation?
Okay, originally from Carcedine, County Kerry. I've been exiled in Dublin now for about 30 years. My youngest child is in 5th year, and as soon as he's done, I'm spending a bit more time at home, and that's not irrelevant to why I got into whiskey. I was a corporate lawyer for 25 years. You know, you spend so much time and so many hours, sometimes not quite literally with your head under a tea towel trying to go through a 400-word document, but figuratively. And it's wonderful to actually put your hands on something, get your hands on something, and spend more time at home. So when we looked at setting up a business, we wanted it to be something that was international, something we know the energy that goes into sorry, I tell a lie. I thought I knew the energy that went into setting up a business and the attention. So when we looked at what was export facing, always been very interested in food and taste. And if you look at Ireland and you look at what we can compete at globally, golf, castles, whiskey, bloodstock, butter and writing. They were the ones that we kind of came down to, and the opportunity came up to buy a wonderful site at home in Carcedine, surrounded by 5 special areas of conservation. One of those old IDA sites with the red ring around it meant that it was properly serviced and properly for planning. But you know, in terms of the whiskey business, it probably divides up into 2 different aspects, really, I think. It divides into the making of it, which goes to the quality point, which is hugely important. And I think there's been a lot of chat here today about what the USP for Ireland is in terms of going out into the world, and it's particularly resonant for whiskey, I suppose, as well as everything else. It's the quality of it. So making it is really important. We have a GI file, which for those of you who wouldn't be in the ins and outs of it, and sure, why would you be? There's a file about what you use in terms of ingredients and how you make it in terms of the process. And what's really important to say is you can only make Irish whiskey on the island of Ireland, and you must mature it in a wooden cask on the island of Ireland for a minimum of 3 years.
Thank you. And Eoin, does Ireland have this kind of geographic status, EU, for Irish whiskey?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So we've had that since 1989. And I think that's one of our main USPs, as I mentioned, is the fact that once Irish whiskey is on the label, you know that it's been produced on the island of Ireland, and you can be...
Perfect.
Yeah.
Let's move on to John O'Connell. I'm beginning to feel like the wonderful late Micheál Hartig. I have to say John O'Connell, no relation, if that's correct. John, can you tell your story? And you're based in West Cork and Skibbereen, is it?
Yeah, basically West Cork Distillers was formed in 2003 by myself and 2 very close friends. We all grew up in Union Hall, a small fishing village. I'd worked for Unilever in corporate research prior to that in the UK, Netherlands and Japan, and then spent 10 years with Kerry Group. The 2 boys became fishermen. They started off as deckhands and then eventually bought their own trawlers. That coincided with the collapse of the fishing industry in West Cork. So in a moment of madness, we set up West Cork Distillers.
So 2 people were in the fishing industry, and yourself, you were ex-Kerry Group or Kerry Gold?
Kerry Group and
Kerry
Unilever.
Group, and you decided to...
Yeah.
Why?
I'd say madness and a moment of disillusion, to be honest. But you know, then that said, we did see that the category had been in growth since 1986. So we were the first new distillery in Ireland since 1987. It wasn't, the craft industry didn't exist at that time, so it was a hostile environment, to be honest.
Yeah.
We kept the head down. In 2013, we moved into Skibbereen, built a distillery there, and then in 2020 built a second distillery.
Wow.
That distillery now employs about 150 people, operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We also have a bottling plant in Waterford with another 100 people in it. And in New Year's Eve 2024, we opened a bulk distribution centre in Kentucky. So that was a pivotal moment.
And what made you different? What was your USP starting off?
I think our USP starting off was technology. We'd all coming from the food manufacturing industry, and I think we had a good understanding how to make things efficiently. I suppose there's a lot of talk about visitor centres and such like. Personally, I think that's a very controversial topic, nearly as controversial as where the boundary for West Cork starts. But, you know, we took a very technology-minded view on it.
Technology.
Yeah, we didn't concentrate on the visitor centre initially for the simple reason that I believe that if you build a visitor centre, it has to be authentic. And I think that the authenticity of the visitor centre has to come with time. And we took a very different approach.
Well, thank you very much. And you've brilliantly introduced authenticity. Catherine, can we go to you? And you're, if I understand correctly, 8th-generation sheep farmer.
Thank you, Martin.
And you ended up creating a whiskey specifically for the Chinese market. Would you share your story, your origin of how you got into the Irish whiskey business, and what's your USP and brand differentiation?
Thank you very much, and thanks for the invite. Catherine O'Grady Powers. Glen is located in County Mayo, just bordering Mayo and Galway, and it spans with my own ancestors back to the mid-1600s. A long history of small pot distilling, always not on the legal form. But we opened a visitor centre in 2015. It's a visitor attraction inviting international guests to enjoy cultural Irish experiences. Our main market is North America and Europe. And in 2017, we were invited out to Shanghai as part of the World Bridge Tourism Conference to present our visitor attraction. And that's where we've seen the massive potential that Asia has to offer. And we have attended on subsequent trade mission trips to promote our tourism products out there. And then, of course, COVID hit. Like many other businesses, we embraced that word pivot. And we looked at, again, what traditionally happens on Glen, what has happened in the past, that we could productize Glen, and we felt Irish whiskey, which has a global footprint, would be a good match for our future productization of the farm. And we looked at our Asian contacts, because working with Asia, we have learned that it's all about relationship building key contacts. And one contact we have is Dr. Yan Mo. He is a key business team member and advisor to us. And at the outset, his first piece of advice was, it's a slow approach. If you want to go to Asia, you can get a quick win, but you're not going to build a good quality brand. And from our research, we have found that the Chinese consumers are looking for authentic products, boutique reserve products. So we decided to go down the route. We're designated by the European Union as a special area of conservation for ecological purity. So we went down the route. We went back to John Teeling, who reached out to us when we opened our visitor centre, and we partnered with G&D experts in the field to produce a single malt Irish whiskey with a view to supplying younger stock. So we have, it's been a long journey. We have bottled a single malt Irish 18-year-old whiskey. I believe some of you may have tested that last night. And we've gone on to produce an Irish cream liqueur using gorse petals that grow on the landscape at Glen. So we're very proud of that. There is more of the navigational route to market in mainland China. We have sent out our products there to whisky connoisseur groups in Shanghai and Beijing because we feel feedback is extremely important. We also wanted to test that shipping route, and our USB, I guess, Martin, would be, one of them would be our B2C model. We are dispatching the product direct from Ireland to the end consumer in China. We didn't engage with a distributor. Currently, we want to use the distribution method for the younger stocks. We want to build our brand first. Most importantly, we want to control the brand and the product and the supply of that. So,
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
That's very insightful. So when the world was basically collapsing during COVID, apart from running a sheep farm, you decided, let's create an Irish whiskey. Good for you, good for you. And then we're going to come to you now, Conor. Conor, if I understand correctly, I've heard lots of good things about Hyde Irish whiskey and chatting to you in advance. But what you do is quite unique. You're involved in blending whiskies, is that correct?
So we're different to Distillery. We're bonders. So our family were originally out of just outside Bandon in West Cork. So since 1640, along 12 generations, we would have been very famous for having a pub and a forge, and they would have sold good whiskey in West Cork. Bad whiskey is called Old Donkey. I don't know if you've heard of that, John. But, so Hyde's pub didn't sell Old Donkey. They were famous for selling good whiskey, which they would source from places like Almonds Distillery in Bandon and other larger distilleries. So we saw the opportunity, as John would have over 10 years ago, 12 years ago now, in the Irish whiskey sector. So we decided to enter the market with our family reputation and name for selling good whiskey. So we launched about 11 years ago now as bonders. So a lot of consumers don't realize that actually when whiskey comes off the still, it looks like that. It looks like vodka. It looks like, it's more or less poachine really when it comes off the still. But it only gets the flavor and the taste that we're all familiar with from the wood. And the cask would, technically, there's arguments over this, but it's somewhere between 50 and 80% of the taste that comes from the wood. So our focus in Hyde is on the wood management. And our USP is it's all about the wood. So we take the whiskey and we put it in different woods. And because of the different wooden casks, we get different flavors. And as a result of that, now we have 23 different whiskies, and we'd be exporting to 50 different markets around the world, but Asia is our biggest market by a long shot.
That's good, and we'll get into that discussion later, and thank you so much. Now, this is not being recorded and it won't be in the summary, but I remember when I was a young student, I was in my last year at UCC, and like so many Irish people, lots of family in America, and the cousins came over from America, and there were 3 lads, all lads the same age, and it was quite funny because they started talking to my grandfather, who lived with us, and he was a man who knew his whiskies and everything else, but they wanted to try poaching. And in those days, and I drove them, but he said, look, I was afraid that they would, find poaching somewhere and get seriously hurt or sick or ill or whatever. So I asked my granddad, and he said he had an old friend outside Bandon. It took a bit of a while to communicate. And his name was Jimmy Wouldn't Make You Go Blind. So Jimmy Wouldn't Make You Go Blind. I drove out to Bandon. I had to meet him first before our Irish cousins came in. And he located, I won't say who. And so I went. And for me, it was like watching one of these American movies where there was a still outside Bandon in the middle of nowhere where they made poaching. And I tried it first, and thankfully I didn't go blind or anything else. So 2 weeks later, when the American cousins came in, we all went out. We had someone else's designated driver, and it was a wonderful experience. So you're the modern, legitimate, safe version of this in many ways.
We're technically known as bonders, so we age the whiskey in different casks over different years to give different flavors. And I suppose it was mentioned earlier that the Asian market is looking for authenticity and relationships, and that's what we offer, a very different, authentic product, because we've won every award you can win for the quality, but we're a family business as well. We're not a corporate.
And I saw that you had your whiskies. I think your colleague was out recently at the Irish Expo.
We were.
In Osaka.
I'm very open about saying it. We definitely wouldn't be as far as we've gotten today without the support of people like the local Enterprise Office and Enterprise Ireland and Bord Bia. And an example would be last week out in Osaka, Irish whiskey was one of the prime brands up there in lights, thanks to the government bodies as part of the Expo 2025, and there was Meet the Producer event where you had ministers out there and government bodies. So all of that is very important for us, to give us a bit of gravitas out in that market, because our partners out there, when they see the government supporting a brand, it's huge influence.
You're approved. And can we move on to you, Eoin? Because I was impressed with Martin Hayden, the minister's visit last week. I mean, half the people on the trade mission were Irish whiskey companies.
Yeah, I think it's a testament, I suppose, not only to the work of Bord Bia, but also the belief that the Department of Agriculture has in Irish whiskey. It's been earmarked it's a message that we've always pressed with them. We're very happy that they've taken it on board. That, Irish whiskey should be recognised not only for its unique cultural and importance as an example of Irish heritage, but also the very high quality that is across the board. And I think that's a copper fastened, I suppose, with the geographical indication status, but then it's really exemplified by the work of the Irish whiskey producers, 4 of whom are here on this panel. And look, I think, again, perhaps it's been influenced by a change in trade policy in certain markets, like the US. But I think now the Department of Ag, the Department of Enterprise, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade have really have taken on board the importance of market diversification, and they have said that they will make every effort to allow producers to bring their product to new markets and new and emerging markets, of which Asia, Japan in particular, would be one. But look, it's a very significant investment from the likes of Hyde Whiskey and the other producers who were there. They still have to send someone over to Japan. It's not always easy to liberate the staff and to get them to spend a number of days in a market that is ultimately very far away. So there's a huge commitment on the side of the Irish whiskey producers as well. And so we have to ensure as the Irish Whiskey Association in our work in engaging with the departments to make sure that investment of time, effort, resources is worthwhile and brings benefits in the end.
But as I said in Tagus yesterday, you've got to pick your winners, because you can't be everywhere and you can't do everything. And can I ask you then, because you've raised the issue with the US, obviously with the transatlantic trade war and the tariffs, how is the industry responding to that? Like, how worried are people? How are they adapting?
Look, I think it's a huge issue of concern for Irish whiskey producers. I think if you look at the overall market, so we export about 1 billion worth of Irish whiskey per annum. Roughly about 46 to 49% of that goes to the US. So effectively, 1 of every 2 bottles of Irish whiskey that's exported is sold in the US. So it's by far and away the biggest market. And there are a number of reasons for which the US is so important. And I suppose we share the same language, we share a very common culture. A US consumer knows where Ireland is, recognises that Irish whiskey is a unique product. And I suppose those are conversely, I suppose, some of the challenges that we face when we go to the Asian market, that perhaps there could be some consumers who wouldn't recognise that Ireland is its own country, has its own unique flavour, etc. And how are Irish whiskey producers responding to that? There's a number of ways. I think we've seen, look, there are some companies who've decided to pause production, who've decided to adopt a wait-and-see approach. I think a number of companies also to try to get ahead of the tariffs by shipping products out to the US ahead of time.
And we saw the huge GDP growth and exports growth in the first quarter.
Absolutely. I believe normally, I think we export around, 5 billion worth of product to the US. This isn't Irish whiskey, this is Ireland overall, including pharma, etc. 5 billion per month. Earlier this month, that went up to 15 billion per month. So, there's... And
we're seeing things like 9.2% GDP growth only for this period.
Yeah, exactly. So, look, it's a very volatile situation at this moment. I think we have to see what the outcome of the negotiations between the European Commission and the US administration will be.
Which again are up and down.
Up and down. Yeah, exactly. I've been to the US twice this year, and I think they're very much the message that we get from people who are there on the ground is that nobody really knows what's going on, and that there's only one decision maker in DC, and we all know who that is.
And have you formally, as an association, no pressure, I'm just asking, like in terms of market diversification, how are you supporting your members?
Well, we have to push to ensure that the Department of Agriculture, the likes of Bord Bia, that they get as much funding as possible. There's a constant request in there that more funding is made available. for Irish whiskey exporters, for Irish spirits exporters. There's a number of things, I suppose, that we're doing as well on the US side. I mean, when you get into the trade war, we were very vocal in the need to exclude spirits drinks from any tariff implementation, tariff retaliation, etc. We were successful in that effort, so we were very happy with that. There's a number of, when it comes to market diversification as well, I think what we have as an association have adopted is identifying a few key markets, some of whom are in Asia.
Great.
And then focusing our efforts and resources on those.
Thank you very much. I'm conscious of time, and the Commissioner will come shortly. We still have a little time, but I just want to move around the panel a bit. John, what you do is quite unique. And do you do kind of own branded whiskies? Because I remember our friends in Cork County Council told me one time they took a group to you, and you were able to, I think there were Chinese visitors, and you were able to put their it's like own label, you could put their name on the whiskies, or what was the situation there?
Yes, Martin, we do a bit of everything. We have our own West Cork Irish whiskey, which sells in about 70 countries globally. We also contract manufacture for brand agencies, so companies that want an Irish whiskey. We also work a lot with retailers, so we have retailers in Japan, China, the US, UK, etc.
Sorry, how did you get into the Asian market?
I think Provine, for which Board BIA support all the producers, was probably the way we got into Asia. We'd also sell a lot of alcoholic ingredients into the Asian market, which is quite peculiar, you know.
And if you're allowed to say, how much of your business is Asia related?
Oh, Asia would be strong. It would be at least 25% at this point.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And we see great potential for Asia. I was looking at some of the figures. Irish whiskey in the last 5 years, the CAGR for Irish whiskey is 22%. If you compare Scotch is 6% and bourbon is 3%. So as a CGR, we're 22%. The Scots and the bourbon producers would say we're starting at such a low base that we can achieve that CAGR. But if you look at absolute case growth, bourbon went from, in the last 5 years, from 4.4 million cases to 4.6. Irish whiskey went from 500 to 1.5 million cases.
Wow.
So our CAGR is greater, but our actual case growth is phenomenally better as well, you know.
Great. And Conor, could I go back to you? You said that Asia is a big part of your business. Again, how did you get into it, and how much of your business is it?
I would say over half of our business is in Asia. We originally, when we launched 11 years ago, we put all our marketing resources into the American market, where statistically half the sales were. But we discovered very quickly we were a drop in the ocean, and we had a full-time sales guy out there for 2 years, and we blew all our marketing budget, but we achieved no sales. So we decided instead of going west, we'd go east. And that was what, so we were, I'd say, one of the first Irish whiskey brands into places like Japan and Taiwan and Korea, and you know, so that has really helped us, because we've grown the brand now over the last 8 years to become recognised. Now there's another 200 Irish whiskey brands behind us right now, but we were one of the first in, and it's because our focus was on Asia, and we've learned so much culturally and how to do business there, and there's so many different norms you have to understand when you're dealing with each market. You know how to talk to people, where to sit in the room, you know, how to eat at a meal, what numbers they like and don't like. You know,
We can give you the etiquette guides.
Yeah,
on those.
you know, so we learned all that over the years. So yeah,
That's very helpful. And June, where are you with Asia? Are you at the beginning of the journey? Are you already doing business?
Yeah,
or?
no, we're at the beginning of the journey. And I think what's important as well is that there's a long lead time in starting a conversation to when you actually end up on shelf, and then depending on who your distribution partner is in that area. And I suppose maybe what makes Irish whiskey a little bit different from some of the other agri products that are being sold in Asia is that we have to talk to consumers, and we have to talk to them often. So it's not a case of a piece of agri-tech being sold to one distributor and then it scales. We have to get people sitting in a Vietnamese city, sitting in Taiwan, to actually make the decision to do that. It's hard enough to make the decision to do that in Ireland. It's triply hard to make them to do the decision anywhere outside of that. So that's something that is kind of, I suppose, relevant to this conversation as well, in the broader sense that Irish whiskey is a bit unique like that. So the reason that's relevant to how long it takes to get there is, it's one thing to get there, it's another thing to get it on the shelf. it's an entirely different thing then, and Conor spoke about marketing budgets to get somebody to take it off the shelf. And you won't have a business if they only take it off the shelf once. They have to take it off the shelf more than once. So those kind of budgets and consumer facing is
very helpful.
important.
And Catherine, where are you now with your, with your whiskey? I mean, where are you now in China?
Well, from our research, and actually John was one of the first people I spoke to at the start of this journey when we were in product development and research. And I have to mention the collaboration that exists within the industry is phenomenal. And Eoin and the team at Irish Whiskey. There's tremendous support out there. We've actually attended the EI trade shows in China where we've displayed the product. We've done that remotely. Currently, the products are in China, in country, for tasting, tests, and packaging. And we wanted to just track that whole journey to ensure that our model is foolproof B2C on the tracking process, and that our customer at the end receives an authentic product. So we have a lot done. We have a WeChat store just designed with our brand developer. That's a big platform in China for online sales. So we hope to explore that more in terms of how we start promoting it now. But we don't, it's not an easy journey, but we see the massive growth potential there, and certainly for market diversification. In our case, we didn't look towards the USA initially because of the costs involved there. With Asia, we're just starting with mainland China, but the opportunities are huge. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And one thing sorry, I'm just checking. Commissioner McGrath's outside. One thing in terms of joining the dots, I often feel that, again, I already said how I hate the term the Far East. And have any of you considered in your whiskey business dealing with the Asian populations, not just in Ireland, but in Europe? So if you look at the Japanese populations, there's approximately 50,000 Japanese within what, let's say, 20-kilometre radius of Paris. There's the same in London, it's probably 60,000. And if you go between, say, Dusseldorf and Frankfurt, one obviously is the manufacturing, the other in Frankfurt, or Bankfurt, as we used to call it when I worked in financial services, would have the financial people. So in essence, there's arguably somewhere between 150 to 200,000 Japanese, most of whom are expats, have money, will travel, can easily come to Ireland. Are you approaching any of those markets?
I'll just say one thing we do to target that market is every year there's a different animal. A year of the whatever this next year it's the year of the horse. So we find when we bring out the year of the horse next year, the sales in that community for that celebratory product are huge. So that's one of the things.
And are
we
those sales made to the Asian community here or in Asia?
Both, yeah. So we originally developed them for Asia, but we discovered then our distributors across Europe were saying, well, we've seen that online. Can we have that for the Asian community in Europe?
So this may connect to what Brian O'Flynn was saying as well, because I've already said to our friends in Tourism Ireland that when you do, your market visit to, say, Germany, for sake of argument, you could at the same time in Germany, have separate meetings with the local Japanese community, because one of the things they all love when they're based here is the cheap Ryanair flights, whatever, to Ireland, because once you're back in Japan, it's a big deal to travel around Europe. But it's very easy here in the visitor attraction. Well,
one thing I would say as well, and we deal a lot with Tourism Ireland, and we've pressed them. We do a survey every year, let's say, of the visitor centres that are members of the association, members of Irish Whiskey 360, the Irish Whiskey Way, and it's visitors from, let's say, the more far-flung places, the likes of Japan, India, China, that there's real growth potential. It's already starting in the visitor attractions, not only the big ones, the ones that we all recognise, but also the ones that are in more remote and rural parts of Ireland. It shows that there's in general a growth of these visitors to Ireland. Tourism Ireland have recognised that potential as well, and have started, I suppose, to reorient their own marketing plans. I suppose what's happening, and it's not unique, I suppose, to the Irish whiskey sector, but it's across the board. It's reflected in government, but also in semi-state bodies such as Board BS, such as Tourism Ireland, is that we need to think a bit wider. not focus on the traditional markets where we found such success in the past, but also look to see where the emergence is, where the potential is. And I'm very glad to see that's reflected not only in the membership of the Whisky Association, but also, I suppose, in the supports that are being made available from grain to glass.
I love a grain to glass. That's the whiskey equivalent of farm to fork, isn't it? And of course, but when you say that to the Asians who use chopsticks, whole different scenario. And you know the origin of chopsticks. How many people know the origin of chopsticks? Think of this, guys. We're in Cork, coastal area. Okay. Have you ever watched seabirds when they go to get the fish? Okay, for a different time. Okay. Look, we're about to start finishing up. Catherine, we'd start with you. Is there any final thoughts? Is there anything important that you want to say that I forgot to ask you, or any advice you want to give to anyone from your experience?
Thank you. Well, just to mention the state agency supports, when we started the journey, Board BIA gave us tremendous support in the branding and packaging journey and the design of that. I think it's very important to conduct extensive research, especially when looking at Asia, and to note the cultural differences of doing business in Asia as opposed to the West, and the respect that really exists there. Also, that it's not a quick win. So if you're looking at Asia, it's a long-term journey, but the rewards are very, very high, and that's where we see huge growth potential. And we're also leveraging our existing visiting population at Glen Visitor Centre for promoting the products in the future to Europe and America. So that's all I have. Thank you.
And I could say as well there, Catherine, that one of our colleagues took some of Catherine's cream liqueur out to Tokyo. And when in Tokyo they have these exclusive, private bars, basically, exclusive bars. And they don't deal with any, what I call, whiskies or any other drinks you can buy on the shelf. They want these boutique brands that other people can't get. And they charge accordingly. They're private clubs. And at your particular bar, they were just trying it first to see what it was like. But sadly, they couldn't give it to any of the customers because the staff liked it so much it was all gone. There was another group. What you get in Japan is you get these groups. I remember when I lived in Tokyo, I met a woman who was the editor of a People Who Like Fish magazine. And this is Japan. And I said to her at the time, I said, how many readers do you have? And she apologized. She said, we only have 92 million readers. And of course, she knew nothing about Ireland and fish or anything. So the scale is enormous, but these leads. There was another group of elite, a small group of elite, successful women in business. And after they drank all of your bottle, there were very few bottles, they immediately went online to buy it. And they were shocked they couldn't buy it, which made them want to buy it more. So you build it through all these personal connections. John, can we go to you? Any final thoughts? Anything important you want to say?
I suppose, just to reiterate what Catherine has said about the support systems, I suppose one underlying sort of trend that we've seen in Asia is the dichotomy of demand, which I think is very unique and only in Asia, where there's a huge demand for EDLP, everyday low price, blended Scotch whiskey, which is as cheap as chips. And then there's the absolute dichotomy of really ultra-premium, age-declared. The Irish, we don't really want to operate in the EDLP area. We want to go for the more premium.
Of course.
But there's a finance issue there, and in terms of support, finance support for Irish companies that I think needs to be challenged.
Okay, finance support for Irish companies. And of course, at that end, in these advanced economies, where, like Japan or Korea, you're competing with really good local products as well, like Hibiki whiskey, say, in Japan, and that's Keisha. June, can we move on to you? Final thoughts?
The Irish have been making whiskey for over 700 years. So I think certainly when we look east, we can say that here, but most consumers have no idea where we are. They have no idea who we are. And as a product, I think to wear the green jersey for Ireland, I think Irish whiskey is uniquely positioned in the sense that we see tourism doing this a little bit. We're kind of like the clickbait. You know, that it's easy to get attention on Irish whiskey, and therefore you can tell the whole story of Ireland, but that's really expensive. And the Minister this morning spoke about Bloom, which we were at, and it's great, it's consumer facing, but it's consumer facing for a potential of 5 million people on the island of Ireland. You'd want to be doing those in every city in a market when you're going there, and if we're to succeed as a category, that's what it's going to take.
So support for the industry again. And then Conor, to you, how have you overcome this thing? You're dealing with the premium end, obviously.
We deal with both ends. So,
Right.
so we everybody would know our Hyde Irish whiskey brand, but we have 2 other brands which are everyday low price, which we developed specifically for the Asian market to hit a different price point. So
What
it's-
advice do you have to people from your success and your experience?
well, my top tip would be to find a partner in each market. It can't be done from a distance. No matter how hard you think, you can.
So find the right partner.
You need to find a partner
and
who's
how did you find the partner?
Oh, we spend a lot of time vetting and picking the right partner, because you can only pick one in each market, but you have to have the partner, because every time I go to Asia, it's a 10-day trip, no matter what way. By the time you get there and settle in and come back, so you have to have somebody who's in the time zone, who knows the culture and knows route to market, who will achieve the sales and marketing goals that you set with them, because you can't do it from Ireland.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then final comment to you.
Yeah, it was mentioned earlier on, I think Catháin has said it, that there is a lot of cooperation and collegiality within the industry. I think that's very important as well. Going into these new markets, as June says, you do put on the green jersey. You do kind of introduce Ireland, I suppose, not only Irish whiskey, but Ireland as a concept. And that is important. You enter the market and then others do follow. I think it's important in these trying times, in these turbulent times that we have, as we look, I suppose, towards new markets and towards these new adventures, that we continue to work together, I think, as an industry. It's a great example of what I think the Irish Whiskey Association does and its membership, and I hope to see more of that as we continue to leave our footprint in these new markets.
Well, look, thank you very much. I'm very happy to say we're 2 minutes ahead of time. We're going to finish there. Could I ask you to thank the panel, please? Thanks so much. So as the panel leaves, could I ask the panel, really, we took the photo to leave by the back door there, and Commissioner McGrath then will come in, and as I mentioned, he will give the closing keynote presentation.